On this day in history, May 21st, 878, Syracuse, Sicily is captured by the Muslim Aghlabids after a 9-month siege. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, going over the history of Syracuse following the Roman capture. Hieronymus, the grandson of Hieron, thought fit to ally himself with Carthage, but he soon fell in a conspiracy. There was a fierce popular outbreak and more bloodshed. The conspirators were put to death, and Hieron's family was murdered, whilst the Carthaginian faction, under the pretense of delivering the city from its tyrants, got the upper hand and drew the citizens into open defiance of Rome. Claudius Marcellus was then in command of the Roman army in Sicily, and he threatened the Syracusans with attack unless they would get rid of Epicides and Hippocrates, the heads of the anti-Roman faction. Marcellus struck his first blow at Leontini, which was quickly stormed, and its sack roused the feeling of the Syracusans against any negotiations with the Roman general, and putting themselves under Epicides and Hippocrates, they closed their gates on him. Marcellus, after an unsuccessful attempt to negotiate, began the siege in regular form, 214 BC, and both the land and sea establishing a camp on Peloponnese, where stood the old temple of Olympian Zeus. But he made his chief assault on the northern side of the defenses of Tyche. The city was defended by a numerous soldiery, and by the ingenious contrivances of Archimedes, whose engines dealt havoc among the Roman ships and frustrated the attack on the fortifications on the northern slopes of Epipolae. Marcellus had recourse to a blockade, and at last, in 212, information was given to him that the Syracusans were celebrating a great festival to Artemis. Making use of this opportunity, he forced the Hexapylon entrance by night and established himself in Tyche and on the heights of Epipolae. The strong fortress of Euryalus held out for a time, but being now isolated, it soon had to surrender. The outer and the inner city of Thucydides still held out, whilst a Carthaginian fleet was moored out of Acradina, and Carthaginian troops were encamped on the spot. But a pestilence broke out in the autumn of 212, which swept them clean away and thinned the Roman ranks. The ships sailed away to Carthage, and on their way back to Syracuse with supplies, they could not get beyond Cape Pycanus, owing to adverse winds, and they were confronted by a Roman fleet. All hope for the city being now at an end, the Syracusans threw themselves on the mercy of Marcellus. But Acradina and the islands still held out, for a brief space under the Syracusan mercenaries, till one of their officers, a Spaniard, betrayed the latter position to the enemy, and, at the same time, Acradina was carried and taken. Marcellus gave the city up to plunder, and the art treasures in which it was so rich, many of the choicest of them, no doubt, were conveyed to Rome. Archimedes perished in the confusion of the sack, pursued his studies. Syracuse was now simply one of the provincial cities of Rome's empire. It retained much of its Greek character and many of its finest public buildings. Its importance and historic associations naturally marked it as the residence of the Roman praetor, or governor of Sicily. Cicero often speaks of it as a particularly splendid and beautiful city, as still in his own day the seat of art and culture. Caligula restored its decayed walls and some of its famous temples. It was plundered by Frankish pirates about 286 AD. In the 4th century, it is named by the poet Asinasis, chiefly, perhaps, on the strength of its historic memories, and there was a purple factory here under an imperial procurator. In 665, Herculius Constans fixed his capital here, but owing to his oppressive government was assassinated in 668. Syracuse has been a place of comparatively little importance since the year 878, when it was destroyed by the Saracens.